So welcome to those of you at mochurch.tv. So have you ever felt like you were haunted by something? And I don't mean like poltergeist or the Blair Witch or the just ongoing failure of a Cleveland NFL team. I'm talking about something even scarier. So I read a quote years ago from a philosopher, theologian. His name was Paul Tillich, the late Paul Tillich. And he said this. He once said that the modern person is disturbed by three anxieties that nothing in this world can satisfy. We're disturbed, we're haunted by three anxieties, modern humans are, that nothing in this world can satisfy. And he said those things are meaninglessness, guilt, and death. That we walk around life thinking about those things, haunted by those things, disturbed, distressed, worried about those three things. And that's really what this series is about, is like, yeah, man, that's pretty profound. And so this series is called Haunted, and it's a 3-week series in October. And this week we are talking about being haunted by that question of meaning or by meaninglessness, and just saying, man, that is a haunting thing, like trying to find what is my life for? What's the purpose? And so if you go to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, this is honestly the best place to see how humanity is haunted by meaninglessness. Ecclesiastes is about the search for meaning in life. Does life have any point? What's the point? And Ecclesiastes is kind of the record, or even the diary, if you will, of someone who calls himself in Hebrew Qoheleth, which just means the teacher, or the philosophy professor, or the seminar leader. It's someone who is a public speaker, and that's what the Hebrew word for that is, Qoheleth. And so scholars, when they talk about this book, will typically talk about what Qoheleth says. And so the book of Ecclesiastes will only be understandable to you if you understand this is a book of questions, not answers. It's really like a good professor. His job isn't to give you answers. He wants to push you to like continue to think about what you're doing in life, what you're doing to try to find meaning. He wants to keep pushing you to your logical end and saying, but why? But why? But why do you do that? Why do you think that? And so he pushes you like a good professor. But it is a book of questions, not answers. In fact, there's a sense where I think the book of Ecclesiastes ought to be the first book of the Bible. You know, just because it prompts you to want to keep asking those questions. And it's like starting off with questions that goad you and make you think and prepare you for the rest of the book, where you find answers. And so Ecclesiastes is not, honestly, the place where you find answers. The rest of the Bible is where you really find the answers. But it's such an important book that's a book of questions. And so someone once described Ecclesiastes as the resident alien of Scripture. Just meaning it's like someone living in a country where they're not a citizen. Like this book, it just feels like, I don't know, it isn't the same as all the other. And you're right, because it's the only book in the Bible written from the perspective of a skeptic. He's not writing as a believer, like, yeah, this is how I should live, this is how you should live. He's writing almost role-playing as a skeptic. And that makes it super intriguing, but very, very different. And so today we're going to just take a high-level look at Ecclesiastes. I honestly would love to do a series one day on Ecclesiastes. I don't know if we could emotionally handle it as a church. I mean, because it is just so much question without answer, question without answer, question without. I mean, that's the way the flow of the book works. And so I'm like, I don't know if we can handle 4 or 5 weeks or 7 weeks on this thing, or whatever. People are like, new church, we got hard charger videos, and then this. I'm outie like a belly button, man. So here's how Ecclesiastes starts. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1, the human man-made heading is, everything is meaningless. That's a summary, okay? Ecclesiastes 1:1 says this, the words of the teacher, in Hebrew that is the words of Qoheleth, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, says Qoheleth. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. It's a real cliffhanger. Like I told you, it's questions. It's just nothing but questions. Like, what would verse 3 say if there were one? What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? No one remembers. Remember this line right here. No one remembers the former generations, or even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Wow. Thanks, Debbie Downer. Okay? This is the flow of the book in a lot of ways. And so bleak, so pessimistic. Why is this in the Bible? Okay? Meaninglessness is the theme of Ecclesiastes. And there is a wide range for the word that is translated meaningless, and in some other translations, vanity. That word has a wide range, and it does mean void of meaning, but it also at times means fleeting or short-lived. Like life is meaningless. I mean, it's fleeting, it's short-lived. Or sometimes it also means it's hard to comprehend. It's enigmatic. I mean, you can't, so basically life is brief, a fleeting moment, and humans cannot fully grasp that. Like life. They can't fully grasp it. I mean, have you ever felt like that? I sure have. Like, I can't get my mind around my life in this world. What's the point kind of thing? And that's what it's saying when it's saying meaningless, meaningless. So the late scientist and Harvard professor Stephen Jay Gould, he was a secular person. He did not believe in God, and so, weigh that with this quote. But he said this, and I've shared a part of this passage before, but kind of a different part years ago. But he said this: we are here because one odd group of fishes had a particular fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures. We are here because a comet struck the earth and wiped out the dinosaurs, giving us mammals a chance that would otherwise not been available. So thank your lucky stars, in a literal sense. Now, this explanation of why we are here, though superficially troubling, like superficially haunting, is what he's saying, if not terrifying, is ultimately liberating and exhilarating. Why, Stephen Jay Gould? We cannot read the meaning of life from nature. We must construct the answers ourselves. So what he's saying is life is an absolute accident, okay? And when he says we can't read the life from nature, what he's saying in a euphemistic way is there's no meaning. There is no meaning. We can't find meaning by looking at the world. There is no meaning. And so this might be terrifying, but it frees us to construct whatever meaning we want for ourselves. How often do you hear that today in movies? Truth is what you make it. Meaning is whatever you make it. And that's what he's saying is we're free to construct, to create whatever meaning we want for our own lives because everything is meaningless. It's all meaningless. So we get to create meaning. Now, Quoheleth has never met Stephen Jay Gould. He's never read Stephen Jay Gould. But one of the reasons Ecclesiastes is so powerful is that Quoheleth would look at that kind of statement and say, that's just spin. He would look at that and say, I've tried that. I tried to construct my own meaning in life, and it didn't work. It was absolutely, I had all the resources to do it too, and it didn't work. And so, Ecclesiastes chapters 1 and 2 especially, it really describing the life of a wealthy king, and he experiments and undertakes an attempt that is very thoughtful. He's not just like, whoa, party time. He's very thoughtful about it, and he says, I want to attempt to find meaning in these different things in this world, life under the sun. And so Ecclesiastes 2 verse 1, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasures to find out what is good. And that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. Like this is a thought experiment. He's doing this as an experiment. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. He said, is it still there? Oh, yeah, here we go. I undertook great projects. I built houses, planted vineyards, made gardens and parks. I amassed silver and gold. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well. So Koheleth examines the rewards of pleasure, but I want you to notice it's both sensual and aesthetic. Okay, that's really important to see here because he focuses more on the joy of luxury than he does on immorality. So there's some of both in there, but he really focuses even more on, so think comfort and pleasure. Think comfort and refined things and luxury and all that. Because it doesn't matter whether it's crass hedonistic pleasure or not. What is pleasurable is his question. So, I mean, let's be honest. There's a downtown and an uptown approach to hedonism. Okay? And what I mean by that is, one says, let's get smashed. The other one says, let's buy art. Okay? Because one is aesthetically beautiful and it pleases me in a way that brings me pleasure, right? And the other one is more of like what we think of when we think of pleasure. But this is comfort and beauty. And this is pleasurable and beautiful and all that kind of stuff. So he's saying they're the same. It's stuff that brings you pleasure or comfort. And so he indulged in refined pleasures, aesthetic beauty, music, incredible food and delicacies. And he had the resources to really enjoy the world's best comedy and laughter through entertainers and jesters, spas and massages, world-renowned cuisine, fine wines and hard liquor, and anything else that would give him a buzz because he wanted to see if he could find meaning in pleasure. A few years ago, I read an economics book, which I don't do often, but I read by Sean Masaki Flynn. And, okay, I'm just going to tip the hand to you. It was Economics for Dummies. Make it sound better than it was. Man, this guy is really refined up there. I saw him drinking communion with his pinky out. So he wrote this book, and he explains that economists have to measure the amount of happiness that different products and experiences and services give us. They have to figure that out. And so they do that with an imaginary unit of happiness that they call the util, and it's short for utility. And so, like, you know, how many utils does this thing give you? How many utils of pleasure? And so they try to do that because they have to figure out goods, services, you know, how does that work? What do people want? What do they like? So, for example, pizza's yummy. Pizza's yummy. There's a couple people that might not think so, but if you think so, then this is what he says. Flynn says, if you're a pizza lover and you haven't had any pizza in a long time, you get a huge amount of enjoyment from eating a slice. That melted cheese, the basil and garlic in the sauce, and the warmth in your mouth all makes you very, very happy. And he created this chart. Check this out. So, first slice, 20 utils. This dude can put away some pizza, right? Like, this would be like my list right here, okay? But he can put away some, okay, maybe right here. He can put away 20 utils in that first, like, they're just trying to, like, wow, that's good. Notice, super yummy. Second slice, still very enjoyable, but he's not starving anymore. Third slice, still really, really good. But notice, it just continues to decrease. And so it brings less happiness than the previous slice. Now notice the extra utility, you know, of each additional slice that it brings you is decreasing. And that's what they call, economists call diminishing marginal utility. Some of you learned this in Economics 101. And so that's a very common thing in economics. And it's based on the fact that people get bored with the things they like, with the things that bring them pleasure. They get tired of repetition and sameness. And so the economists have to take into account when they try how to predict how people will choose to spend their money. But look what happens at the eighth slice. 0 utils. No enjoyment from the eighth slice whatsoever, which I think if I had an eighth slice, I'd be done, okay? But then, ninth and 10th slice, negative utils. It actually is going backwards. Now, it actually can make you sick to get to the point where, wait a minute, a moment ago, this was very high pleasure. Now, I've had so much of it, I'm bored with it. It's making me sick. It's causing me pain. It's giving me what medical experts call the squirts. Like, this is, This is bad at this point, okay? Like, this is really bad. And so Sean Masaki Flynn says this phenomenon isn't limited to just pizza. It applies to nearly everything. Unless you're addicted to something, you get tired of it as you have more of it. And each additional unit brings you less happiness than the previous unit. So Koheleth is like, I learned this a long time ago. Like, the things that give us pleasure, ironically, don't satisfy us. Think about that. I mean, that alone is haunting. The things that bring us pleasure don't satisfy us. Like, we want them less and less as we keep going, and we're like, man, that's not it. That's not it. Like the Protestant theologian Mick Jagger once said, I can't get no satisfaction. Like, I can't be satisfied. Like, I get it all. I'm a rock star. I can't. I'm Koheleth in tight jeans, and I can't get no satisfaction. Like, so traditionally, King Solomon is credited for writing Ecclesiastes, and I have no beef with that whatsoever. But some scholars say, well, we call him Koheleth because there's a debate among, maybe at the beginning of this book, he's role-playing Solomon and speaking as Solomon and all the riches and resources he has. And then some say later on, feels like there's evidence that he's not a king because he's talking about injustice. And other people are like, yeah, he can see that injustice as a king and commentate on it. But either way, some people and a lot of people think King Solomon wrote this book. And elsewhere in Scripture, it tells us about King Solomon. King Solomon had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. That is 1,000 women. 1,000 women. Like Kennard Archer said, I have a very high tolerance for pleasure, okay? Late in his life, back in April 2013, Hugh Hefner, who was the founder of Playboy magazine, he said that he had slept with over 1,000 women in his lifetime. Now, I heard that quote from Conan O'Brien watching a Late Show one night, and Conan O'Brien hysterically responded, dang, that's like a woman a year. He was real old, Hugh Hefner, real old. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to go on a limb here and say of King Solomon, who had 1,000 women in his life, I'm going to go on a limb here and say he wasn't putting all the time he should have put into all those relationships. I'm going to go on a limb here and say some of those ladies were just around for sex. Right? 1,000 women. And so, in fact, the Hebrew word for harem in verse 8 is possibly connected to the same root word that means breasts, which means what he is saying is all the breasts in the world couldn't satisfy me. Like, there's refined, and there's cultured, and there's wine, and then there's hedonistic pleasure of just having everything you want sexually, and I had all the resources, and it didn't make me happy. It didn't give me meaning. It didn't satisfy me. He says in chapter 2, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. Everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. And when you see that phrase that he says there, chasing after the wind, it's such a cool image, first of all. A chasing after the wind, what does that mean? Wind is something that you can't keep. It's fleeting. You can't go to North Carolina to the beach and be like, oh, that breeze felt so good. I'm going to put it in a bottle, take it back to Cleveland with me. You can't do that because it's a pleasure it's fleeting. It's just gone. You can't keep it, and you can't grab it and hold on to it. So the thing is, we're not just after pleasure. When we're pleasure seekers, when we're like, man, that's the thing I'm going after, that's the thing I'm living for. You're not just after pleasure, you're after transcendence. You're after something next level, something otherworldly. And that's why you're never satisfied by this pleasure. And so the more Koheleth indulged in pleasure, the less it fulfilled him. And he was haunted by meaningless. It's all meaningless. I've had it all, and I'm not satisfied. Well, if meaning isn't found in pleasure and refined aesthetics and arts and sex, where is it found? There's one other I'll explore because he explores several. But the other one that I think is also super applicable to us is he explores work, success, significance. And this is it. Toil is meaningless, is the human man-made heading for this. Verse 17, so I hated life. That's the book. I hated life, okay? Because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. It was generally grievous. All of it is, that's a Star Wars joke for anybody who's like, I didn't know what he just said there. Wait, I take that back. You don't have I'm the one that does. Wait, what is it? General Grievous. Okay. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil in which I have poured my effort, skill under the sun. What I spent my life doing, this too is meaningless. He's haunted by meaninglessness. Like, this has to be an answer to meaning in life. I mean, we expect work and success to do three things for us: to bring us satisfaction, to make a contribution, and to give us recognition. Those are the three things that we want from career, from work, from success if we get success. And so Koheleth says, work, let me sum it up for you. It's grief and pain. Work is grief and pain. Why? Well, grief, because in work you're always being evaluated. It's inevitable that you are going to fail and face disappointments and criticism about your work. So it brings me grief. It's always grief. And the other one, pain. Man, you know this. Work breaks down your health. It breaks down your health, your body, your mind. That's what work gives to you. And so a funny thing, there's a survey, a major survey that was done, tons of people, and they asked, if you had a 25th hour in every day, what would you do with that 25th hour? 85% of people said what? You know, sleep. Without question, we know what the answer to that survey is, because 85% of us would say, oh yeah, heck yeah, sleep. You are under 25 if you didn't say sleep, okay? Like sleep, oh my gosh, yeah, sleep, because work drains you. Work is grief and pain. And you know what? That's funny though, there's an amazing consensus in our culture that we believe, and that is that work is the way that you get a hold of the world and you make your mark on it. Like, this is how you take hold of it. This is how you leave your mark. This is how you have significance in the world, and people remember you. And Koheleth is like, wait a minute. Remember what he said at the beginning of chapter 1? He's like, people don't remember you. We don't remember the people from the last generation. I mean, people are forgotten. Like, rarely are people remembered for what they did 100 years from now. Tell me a little bit about your great-grandmother. Tell me a little bit about your great-great-grandmother. That's not that long ago. And you're like, man, I mean, people are just, they're forgotten. And what they do, and the generations move on. He said the next generation, it will be forgotten by the next. And so he said, I hated all things I toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. I don't know whether this guy's going to be wise or going to be a fool. What's the point? It's meaningless. Haunted by meaninglessness when it comes to finding meaning in my work and in my career. I saw the tombstone of John Keats, the famous English poet. And it's funny, it doesn't say his name on it at all. It's kind of very artistic. It says young English writer. And the epitaph says, here lies one whose name was writ in water. Think about that from a writer. Writ in water. Basically saying, I tried to make my mark in writing. I wrote, my name was like written in water. It was just gone. There's another English writer who I thought was even more powerful that said in his epitaph, you know, he tried to make his mark in the world, and he said, I only plowed water. What does that mean? It means when you pull your plow out of water, there's no sign that you were ever there. Like, that's sobering. Like, what I did is gone so fast. Like, the mark that I left, man, that is haunting. You don't make your mark on the world. It sweeps you away. There's a guy whose name lived over 100 years ago. His name was James Strong. He wrote something called Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. And what he did, he spent his lifetime taking every word of the Bible and saying, If you look up, heaven, you want to see every place heaven is mentioned in the Bible, here are all the verses where it's mentioned. He did this for every word. He did it for and the. Everything. King, angel. I mean, he did it for he spent his entire life doing that. Today, how long do you think it would take to create with a computer an exhaustive concordance? 20 minutes? How long would it take you to find every verse in the Bible that says the word angel in it? With Google, 20 seconds? That's crazy, but that's the nature of the world. Everything that we're doing, if we're finding meaning in work, is plowing water. If we're trying to make our mark by people will remember me because I poured my life into this. I didn't know my kids. I had a terrible marriage, all three of them. But I poured my life into this. I poured my life. That's the nature of the world. We're plowing water. There's no sign we were ever there 100 years later, unless we're really significant. People remember us for 200 years. And so when you overwork, here's what's really happening is you're looking for an identity. I know this because it's self-reflection. You work hard because you're looking for an identity. You are not manufacturing a product. You are manufacturing a self. You are trying to create, as Stephen Jay Gould said, man, you're trying to create. You don't know who you are, so you're trying to prove yourself, and the work is about you, and you're trying to prove, I am somebody special. I matter as much as you do. I am somebody special. I'm somebody real. It's being haunted by meaninglessness, and you just pour yourself into toil. And there's something that's going on down deep within our human hearts. It's an identity vacuum. I don't know who I am. I don't know what the point is. So if I do this, maybe I can leave my mark. And you see how trying to manufacture a self leads to overwork? Because if you're doing that, you don't have time for balance. You don't have time to balance kids and a spouse or whatever. Like if you're really going to leave your mark, man, you have to sacrifice your kids, your marriage, your friendships on the altar of success and career. And here's how messed up we are as human beings. And this thought really stands out to me. It's like when we're headed down one of these wrong roads searching for meaningless, whether it's accolades and achievements or pleasure or work, like when we're headed down that road, we never look down and be like, man, I'm not getting meaning from this. This isn't satisfying. What we do, we never say, you know what? I think I should try a different road. What we say is, and what many of us in this room right now are still saying is, I just need to go further. It's relentless. And it takes wisdom to be like, I've read the stories of lottery winners. I've read the stories of Kurt Cobain. I've read the stories of rock stars and how they're not freaking happy. But I just got to go a little bit further because it will make me happy. But instead, we have to be like, I got to get on a different road. I got to get on a different path. This is meaningless, utterly meaningless. But I just keep running on the rat wheel. I just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So, frankly, this is one of the things about Ecclesiastes that I do think is interesting is you can go through life and not be haunted by meaning. You can go through, and you kind of like be perplexed by Ecclesiastes or be like, well, that was a sermon, But you can do it. But the point is Quelheleth is assuming that you're doing one thing, and that is thinking. He is assuming you're thinking about meaning and your point in this world and life and what's it all about. So you have to be thinking. And here's a big danger is we live in a time in history right now where it is probably the easiest in all of human history to not think. Because we can just go to Amazon, Netflix, Hulu. There's so much to entertain us and distract us and medicate us from thinking. And just not even like meaning, oh, come on. Something to do. There's something to do. I'll entertain myself with something to keep me from thinking about, this is haunting. What is the point of my life? And so occasionally you have to ask, what's the point? What have I really accomplished? For instance, with my work, what am I accomplishing? Now, one of the other phrases that comes up over and over throughout the book is, I tried to check this out and see what things were like for people under the sun. It says over and over, under the sun. What does that mean? Well, it is kind of straightforward. It's basically saying like, picturing as a skeptic, there's nothing beyond the sun. Or if there is, it's a God who isn't involved and doesn't care. So if this world is all we have and searching for meaning in this world, what is there that I can discover about pleasure under the sun in this world? There's no heaven, there's no eternity, just under this sun. And so, man, when you do that, life in this world is so frustrating. It is so haunting, so frustrating. And Quoheleth is haunted by every fresh piece of evidence that life is truly meaningless under the sun if you're trying to find meaning here. The biblical scholar I was reading for, studying for this message, and this passage really jumped out at me. He summarizes this well. He just says, can purpose for life be found in nature, money, self-indulgence, property, position, intelligence, philosophy, even religious observances? And then he says, obviously some of these pursuits are better than others. Absolutely. If you're going to be addicted to something, let it be working out versus heroin. Okay, there's some things that you can be addicted or obsessed with. We're like trying to find my identity here. Yes, some of them are healthier than others, no doubt, absolutely no doubt. Nutrition, Planet Fitness, sure, LA Fitness, whatever. That's much better than, a pleasurable agent, okay? But he says, obviously some of these pursuits are better than others, but all encounter some crowning frustration that invalidates them as solutions to the problem of living. And then he says one last line that frankly gave me chills. He said, the world does not contain the key to itself. Think about that. The world does not contain the key to itself. It's like you're in an escape room and you're like, we can't figure it out. We can't figure like intercom. We can't figure it out. We don't know what to do. We're stuck. It's like, well, the key isn't in there. There's hints to how to get the key, but the key is not in there. Like that's kind of what is what happening here. He says something very profound when he says the world does not contain the key to itself. Here's the thing I've learned about myself. I thought about this. I heard someone say it, and that's what prompted my thoughts. It's like, this is so true of Dan Smith's heart. You could take 20 truckloads of money and pour them into my heart, and real soon I wouldn't be satisfied. How do I know that? From Brian Head Welch, from Kurt Cobain, from lottery winners that I read. I'm like, I don't need to be them. I can learn from them. That's not going to make me satisfied and bring my life meaning. You could take 20 truckloads of pleasure, and I like pleasure. You do too. You could pour them into my heart, and real soon the utils would start going down. Like you could take accolades and success, and I've had enough little moments of success to know that's not going to be what's going to satisfy me is people praising my name or whatever. You could pour 20 truckloads of it in my heart. My heart would be like, man, I need more. Give me more. Like, what is wrong with my heart that is the way I respond to all that stuff? Here's what's wrong. There's a hint in Ecclesiastes 3:10. I think the coolest verse in the whole book. It says, He, God, has also set eternity in the human heart. He has also set eternity, old translation, in the hearts of men. And what that means is God has implanted in humans the sense of eternal existence. That He has put endlessness in our hearts, the desire for eternal beauty and eternal pleasures. Like there's something in our heart that longs for something bigger than what we can experience in this world. We long for stuff that's eternal. We long for it. Why could you pour all those truckloads of things in my heart and not be satisfied? It might be because the hole in my heart is God-sized. That's what's missing from my heart. That is what will fill it. So meaninglessness is the end destination of every road except for one. And if you don't read the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, you will kill yourself. If you read through it, somebody said to me last service, I'm afraid someone might leave before you get to the end of the sermon. I'm like, I know, that's Ecclesiastes too. You'll kill yourself. You'll commit suicide because you're like, right, it isn't pleasure. It isn't work. You've exhausted all these things, accolades and success. I mean, the only thing he doesn't talk about really that I can see in there is like being an awesome mom or dad. Like man, what is it then? What is it? Here's the last two verses of the book. It's the M. Night Shyamalan ending. Here it is. Now, all has been heard. Here is the conclusion on the matter. The guy who has it all, this is where you don't expect him to go. It's the twist ending. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. Now, this is super profound. And really, frankly, I'm just doing what the book is doing, and that is saying, here's what life that isn't God-centered looks like. If you're searching in this world, meaningless, 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 here's the one thing that's going to give you meaning. The one thing that's going to fulfill you is a God-centered life. He doesn't get into what we call the gospel. You know, Jesus came, God in the flesh, died for us on the cross for our sins, rose from the dead, conquered death and the grave. He doesn't get into that. He just gets to the God-centered life. That's where he ends. And here's the great thing about this. You don't have to do something extraordinary with your life to be significant. All you have to do is live a life of simple obedience. To live a life of simple obedience in your little family, your little corner, your little community of the world, that is a significant, successful, difference-making life when God is at the center. Fear God, respect God, revere God, and keep his commandments. Like, I'm going to live a life of obedience to God in my small ways as a father, my small ways as a husband, in my small ways as a pastor, in my small ways as a guy who does assemblies for elementary school kids in my community. I'm going to try to be obedient with what God has given me. I'm going to honor him and respect him and revere him. And that's Paul Tillich when he said, man, people are haunted, modern people, by three things. They just can't escape. And there's no answer for these things in this world. It's because the world doesn't contain the key to itself. And putting God at the center changes everything. I mean, meaning is added back to all those things when you put God at the center. When that puzzle piece is put in the right place, meaning is added back to all those things. I hope you didn't leave before this point, okay? This is very important. But it says in the very last verse of Ecclesiastes, for God will bring every deed into judgment. Usually that's like intimidation, scary. But he says, whether it's good or evil. What he's saying is every act, every thought, every action, every conversation has meaning. Nothing is meaningless. That's what that means. He assesses everything. Nothing is meaningless when God is at the center of your life. Nothing will go unregarded, unremembered, or unvalued, so humans can play their part with passion. Humans can play their roles in simple obedience with passion. In fact, work, when you're not using it for significance and trying to manufacture a self, our work matters and can be enjoyable. We already have significance in him, so we're not trying to find it by killing ourselves with work. And so we don't have to overwork to justify our existence, and we don't have to underwork because we see work as meaningless. And pleasure, man, within God's parameters, pleasure is so enjoyable. Like, when your pleasure is guilt-free and hangover-free and STD-free and regret-free, when it's all those things, pleasure actually points us to God. I mean, a work of art, a glass of wine, sex between a man and a woman in marriage, it points us to the Creator. Ephesians 5 says that. It points us to God. Enjoyment is not just something that we seek. It's actually a gift from God. And man, everything matters. So one little example. You could have a conversation with a person on a plane that you don't know, and you end up in the spiritual conversation. Hey, I saw you got this second-timer t-shirt. What's that? And you end up in this conversation about God or whatever. Here's the thing. That conversation matters, and it will be remembered. Maybe for 400 years later. You could be standing around the throne of God with that person 400 years from now, 4,000 years from now. That conversation had meaning and it mattered because God is at the center of your life. If you are haunted by meaning, Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. I know there are people here and listening online who are weary and burdened from working themselves to death, from figuring out how to get the next fix. And it doesn't have to be drugs or sex. It can be comfort, refined joy, luxuries. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He said, come to me. Don't go to that. Don't go to that. Don't go to... Come to me. St. Augustine, who was kind of a sex addict, honestly, when he lived in the 300s and 400s. Yeah, there was sex back then. 300s and 400s. St. Augustine, who wrote a monumental book for Western society called Confessions, he wrote, my soul is restless till it rests in you. Let's pray.